Hello, my front-end friends. I realize that accessibility can be a hard topic to really dive into at times. It can feel a little bit overwhelming, or you might even be told by your boss not to worry about it, or you have a sprint deadline that you have to meet, and so you're just going really quickly and maybe taking a few shortcuts or just not thinking about that side of things a little bit. But I recently had a talk with Salma Alam-Naylor about why it can be so important, because she ran into a lot of problems when she had to stop using her mouse and keyboard because of severe wrist pain that she was having, and it highlighted how important thinking about these things actually is.
I did not know navigating the internet was this bad. Simple things like, you know how we always talk about make sure you show when an element is focused, if it's clickable. So many websites don't do that. So I'm like saying tab, tab, tab with my voice, and I can't see where I've tabbed to. And so then when I want to click on something, I have no idea where I'm clicking, and it's so unusable.
And I know accessibility can be a really deep topic. It can even be overwhelming at times. I've definitely been there where I just was overwhelmed by things. But today what we're going to be doing is talking about the low-hanging fruit, the super easy things that you can do without having to add extra time and just making sure you're not making really simple mistakes. And we're going to be looking at real websites like StubHub's right here, with the problems that they make. We're going to be looking at tools that we can use to help us if you're not too sure about things, and just general best practices and things like that. So first up, here on StubHub, this is their sell tickets page, and all the links to everything I look at will be linked in the description. And yeah, this sell tickets page is a disaster. There's actually a lot of problems with it. The first one is, what I'm going to do is I'm going to open up my dev tools. I'm just going to poke around like at what should probably be an H1 that's just a div sitting here. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. And the first tool that I'm actually going to suggest that you use, because there is Lighthouse that's built in, but sometimes it can be hard to it has accessibility, but it has some other things as well. But I've added Axe Dev Tools here. This is a paid, or you can upgrade to Pro if you want. You can get a free trial there as well, but they do have this for free. I'm using the free version right now, where you can just do a full page scan. And by doing the full page scan, it's going to highlight a whole bunch of issues for us here. And you can see, let's just close this. I'm not going to export, but it has 44 issues on this page, which is a lot. We're going to skip over some. We'll come back to a couple of the others after. But I'm going to come down pretty low here, where down here, I think my face is on top. So right here, page should contain a level 1 heading. And yeah, I wasn't wrong. When I went in here, I'm like, maybe they stuck it in their logo. They did something else. But no, it really was that they just don't have an H1 on their page anywhere. So, just use an H1. And I actually did a video about how heading levels work, because this site is a disaster for that. Like here, they're actually using their H2s, which is cool. Okay, this area has H2s in it. But then when you get down to some other areas down here, and then we're back to using divs when maybe that should be a heading. Then you come down here, and these are paragraphs that maybe could have been headings. And heading levels are relatively straightforward. They create a bit of a table of contents of everything. You have your H1, then each section after that would be an H2, the subparts, subtitles in there, H3s, and so on and so forth. So we don't use them for styling purposes, but we should also be using them, not just throwing divs and putting text in here. And a few of the websites we're going to look at today, you get the feeling, especially this one here, was an afterthought, but also just like different people were throwing at different things, since we actually have H2s here. I believe here we actually have like block quotes coming in. So like the person doing this was like, oh, I know I can use a block quote, but then there's a div around the text instead of, and no H1, right? So just use your heading levels. There's another thing that Axe highlighted here that I wouldn't have found just by poking around, but it's right here. Document should have one main landmark. They didn't use a main anywhere on their page. And what I like about the Axe here is it tells you where the problem is. It's at the top level. So somewhere in here, there should be a main. And if you click on the more information here, you'll actually, it'll open up more information and why you should have your main and best practices on landmarks and all of that. Because the other problem, because there's no main, there's a whole bunch of issues down here saying all page content should be contained by landmarks, and there's no main, so there's a whole bunch of stuff that's not inside landmark regions. I'd encourage you to check out that more information. There'll be links, as I said, to everything, so you can get more information on what landmarks even are, because I don't want to dive too deep into the nitty-gritty. I want to focus on big picture stuff, use semantic stuff, use your nav, your section, your main, use your heading levels correctly, and you're already doing better than way too many websites that are currently out there. And actually one area here they could have made their life easier, talking about semantic HTML, is this part here where they built out this entire thing just using divs. And we can come and take a look, and there's a div in here, and All of this was built using divs, and they could have just used it. Like, there's nothing fancy here. This could have just been built with a detail summary, and it would work exactly the same way. You don't have to bring in any JavaScript or other things like that. It just functions and just works. So like, by using the semantics, not only is it better for your page, it's one of those things where it also makes your life easier sometimes. So just, quick searches can often help you find these things. And there is a bonus actually to semantic HTML, or a trick maybe. If you're being told, maybe that you're working on your company website and you find mistakes like this where the semantics aren't well done, you could probably sell it as it being good for SEO to convince the stakeholders and the people above you and all of that to maybe invest some time into fixing it. I don't actually know if it is good for SEO anymore. The Google bots are pretty smart, but a lot of people strongly believe it is, and maybe there is an impact there. So you could definitely use that as a selling point to maybe get some time dedicated to fixing semantic issues within websites that you're working on. And if ever you just want some quick tips and other things, I do have an HTML and CSS tip of the week that you could check out, where I talk about CSS tips, as you might expect from my channel, but I also highlight a few things like the KBD element that you might not be aware of. By the time this comes out, the search element article will also be up, and it's just really quick things, not to necessarily go in depth on what the thing is with demos. If you want more information, all of the articles do include a dive deeper, but it's more about just making you aware that these things exist in the first place. You can just check out the website if you want. There is an RSS feed, or you can sign up to get email updates once a week when a new article comes out. Completely up to you if you want that, but could be a nice way to find out about some of the lesser known HTML elements that not enough people are using. All right, next we're going to head over to Spirit Airlines here. And this Spirit website, I almost decided to use for all of the problems I had, but it was so easy to find other websites that were terrible too. I didn't want to only pick on Spirit, but this page is a bit of a disaster. And what's interesting is at least it looks better than the one we were just looking at, right? The StubHub one, I assumed there would be problems when I saw how bad it looked. This one looks not terrible, but there's just so many issues with it. And the first thing I want to look at in this one is to take a quick look at the alt text. And this is something that might not get picked up when you run it through an automatic scan like this one. And maybe we're going to get it. I haven't actually run this scan to look for it. So here it's saying images must have alternative text. So there's actually 2 images that didn't hit that. And then it'll show you where they are. So I can click on the inspect element here, and it's going to highlight it, and then I can go and find that image. So there are a couple of images that don't have alt text, which is a problem, but that doesn't find problems with bad alt text. So if I come and take a look at the image here, you can actually see that the alt text on this image, so let's get that there, it's free spirit image is the alt text on that. That's pretty bad. And if I look at this one, it's my Wi-Fi image, even though this has nothing to do with Wi-Fi, or as far as I can tell, this is just being automatically generated from the file name of the image, probably by whatever the CMS is. And the people throwing it in there just never bothered to update the alt text. This is really bad for 2 reasons. First of all, the alt text is completely meaningless and doesn't go with the content they're being used for. So say the image was broken, the little description doesn't tell us anything. But also, if somebody is using something where the alt text is being read out to them, imagine how frustrating of an experience it is when all of the alt text they're coming across is these completely meaningless things. So it's just cluttering up, and you'd actually be better off in these cases leaving the alt completely blank and just having an alt attribute to make sure your image is still considered valid. Because you can do this. If it's a decorative image, which I would actually argue in this case it is a decorative image. I don't know how no charge or cancel fees associates with this image at all. But in all of these cases, these images are more or less decorational. I think I would prefer to have alt text on them if it tied in with the content. But if you're going to have bad alt text, you could say it's decorational perhaps. And 2 resources I'm going to give, and these will once again be linked in the description. This is from the A11Y project, just about how to do good alt text. So it talks about what alt text is. Don't begin alternative text with photo of or a picture of, because assistive technologies already know that it's an image and will indicate that it's an image. So then you get the redundancy of it saying that it's a photo or image twice. One thing I hadn't realized until recently is you shouldn't put line breaks in your alt text. So that's kind of interesting, just because it makes it awkward for the way the screen readers read them out. But then you can use empty alt attributes, as it says right here, for any image that is decorative and not necessary for understanding the content of the page. For example, an image providing decoration of an article's heading could be hidden by giving the image an alt is equal to blank, or just having an empty alt attribute on there. And there's a few other things I would suggest reading, like this one actually is good, where if you have the same image multiple times, you might actually want to have different alt text because it depends on the context of where it's being used. So a logo within a website's header often doubles as a link back to the home page. So you could have company's name -home, so people know that it's actually going back to the home page. And the same logo, if it were used in the footer of the site, could be next to the company's name and the copyright information. So the company's name's already there, then the logo can just have a blank alt and it would be completely fine, just because it's there for decorative purposes and it's not actually contributing anything. So yeah, I would definitely suggest giving this a read, nice little quick breakdown. And if you'd like to learn more about writing alt text, I'd really suggest this article by Eric Bailey. It's really good. It's a bit long. I'm not going to go through the whole thing with you, but how Dungeons and Dragons taught me how to write alt text. And it's a really good read. So I would definitely just suggest giving it a read because it's fun. But the part that I think is the most important is this one right here, is when it comes to writing alt text, it's not just about describing the image. And we sort of got that from the last one, saying the context matters. But start by describing the most important thing first, and also don't be just overly verbose, because sometimes people go all out with them. Or these days I know some people are using AI to write the alt text. You want to be really careful with that, because it doesn't always know it's in your image, but it often won't give you the right context of, in terms of why that image is in that place on the site anyway. And so like something like this is a good example where a large room with rough stone walls, brownish moss clings to the walls, and trickles of brackish water also flow down parts of it. Broken furniture is scattered across the floor. The ceiling is so high that you cannot see it. Also, there is a large red dragon attacking you. All right, so we're missing, this is the important part, and it was buried all the way at the bottom. This was setting the tone of where you are really well, but no one really cares about that when there's a big red dragon attacking you. And so here's a rephrased version of it with: a huge dragon the color of smoldering coal is attacking you. It is rearing its snake-like neck up to strike, head poised underneath the ceiling that is so high you cannot see it. Its dull black iron-like claws dig into the floor of the rough stone room as it prepares to lunge at you. Broken furniture is scattered about, no doubt victims of previous altercations. So still setting the mood, doing all of that, but focused. The important part is focused on what people would actually care about. So that same principle applies to writing alt text as well. So yeah, definitely give this article a read. It's a really good one. All right, for the next thing we're going to talk about is your color contrast ratios. We're going to jump on over to OpenAI's website right here. And so let's scroll down a little bit here, and we're going to see that there's these, and like I noticed these were really light. So what you can do, if you don't even want to open up your dev tools to do do scans or stuff like that, I should be saying, if ever you see something, you can grab this little guy right here and you can hover over it. And often you're going to get these where I'm going to zoom in a bit on here, where you can see this contrast is saying that there's that little error thing popping up where it's like, watch out, this contrast is bad. And this is for the AA standard. There's two levels of contrast. There's a AA and a AAA. AAA is what you probably should be aiming for most of the time. But the contrast thing here in Chrome will flag it as okay as long as you're hitting AA. And different companies will have different standards too. Some companies, everything has to be AAA, and other companies that have policies on this might say that AA is okay. So just if you do have anything in where you work, just be aware of what the standard actually is. But yeah, you can see that here I'm actually getting this low contrast coming up. So that's something that you want to watch out for, because I actually, it looks low contrast. A lot of designers like low contrast text because it's a way of really separating the hierarchy of things, but you just have to be really careful with it and make sure that we're not jumping too low. It's white and black. It's actually easy to hit good contrast ratios. When you start bringing in colors, it can be a little bit harder. And there is debate about the algorithms that are used for figuring out contrast, but at least this sets us up. And like, if you're getting a warning, definitely something that at least is worth investigating a little bit more. I know you might just be designing what the designers are giving you, but this is a pretty big problem. And you also have to think about how color and other things come in with people that have color blindness and other things. So, just because sometimes it looks like it might be okay, you might be getting a warning because the color's being used. If you're colorblind, can lead to issues as well. Don't know if there's an overlap there and how the color ratios work actually, but something to think about. And the Lighthouse DevTools will find things for this. But the Axe DevTools, of course, will also. So if I do my full page scan here, there's actually 75 issues on this page, and 57 of them are serious. So OpenAI, our AI overlords, still can't design a website. Not too surprised by that. So there's issues with some area rules, and if a lot of those things, they have LI elements that aren't in lists. That's interesting. I hadn't planned on finding that one. But here we go. There's some color contrast issues that are popping up. So quick scans like this can just help them find it instead of you poking around and trying to use this guy to find them. So I'm actually going to jump back on over to Eric's site here, where if I do an inspect in here and I pull this open, you're going to see like here it's showing me the contrast ratio is good. I get my check mark. If I go on this one, it's not actually saying anything. And you would expect this to actually be able to show it. The reason it's not though is there's a link in here, and so it just looks at the entire thing and compares it to the background color. And because there's two different colors in the text, Chrome doesn't actually do the check. So one thing you can actually do for this is use Firefox instead. Firefox has a better accessibility checks where it's not done with the regular inspector that you'd have. So the inspector has this guy, but it won't show you anything. But if you click on this extra stuff here, there's an accessibility tab, and that gives you an accessibility checker, and that will actually show you the different ratios based on whatever you're hovering on top of. And it also works on top of gradient backgrounds. It's not perfect, but it checks the different colors in the gradient. So at least it gives you a little bit better of an idea versus the Chrome ones, where as soon as it's a background image, it just doesn't tell you anything. So and there's a little bit more information. This accessibility tab in Firefox is actually quite good and can give you a lot more extra information on different things. So I would recommend checking it out if you do have Firefox installed. All right, the next one we're gonna go look at is ESPN. And the ESPN website here is really bad when it comes to keyboard navigation. And we talked a little bit about keyboard navigation, or we heard Salma talking about the keyboard navigation. And if I come on here and I push tab, I don't actually know where I am. And I can push tab again, and I still haven't got anywhere. And then once I get to my third tab, I actually highlight over here. And then if I push tab again, it disappears. And if I hit tab again, it goes to the second score, and then the third score, and then the fourth score, and then the fifth score. And I have to double tab every time, and I don't know what I'm getting in between them. But I sort of think I do, just because I see the link showing up at the bottom of my page. So if I see the focus ring, which is already hard to see, and I push something, nothing actually happens. I'm like focused on the box, but it's not an interactive box that lets me go into any information on that. If I push tab a second time and then push return, it actually goes into the game itself. So a really bad experience there to begin with, because the focus ring should be showing me what I can interact with, but that thing is not interactable. And the other problem is there's a lot of scores that come across here at the top, and I have to tab my way all the way to the end before I can get over to here. And even here, there's a problem. Once I get down to like where the logo is, I can't actually, like, I'm hitting tab now and I don't know what I'm selecting. This is what Salma had mentioned, was there's lots of websites out there where the focus rings are gone and people just don't make things focusable. And there's a lot of people who use their keyboard and tab through things, or they use their voice to go through, or they use different methods of navigating a website than using a mouse or just like a touch screen. So it's really important. It's a really easy thing. You just have a focus state on there. And if you don't want a focus ring when somebody is like clicking a link and then, it's a button instead of a link, just put a focus visible, and that should handle the problems that you're using. But yeah, really terrible. And just to highlight how bad this actually is, I'm going to open up Polypane. And so here's Polypane, which, if you don't know, it's a browser for developers. So if I jump over to this tab really fast, here's like an example. You can have multiple panes open of the same website at different sizes, which is kind of fun. And then you can also check like really quickly some different media features. So you can check light mode, dark modes at the same time, or other things while you're developing. There's a whole bunch of accessibility things and just developer experience built in. So there is a link to them in the description. It is an affiliate link. So if you do end up purchasing it, it does help support my channel with no extra cost to you, but you can just check them out as well, polypane.com. But we're going to jump back on over to the ESPN site here, because what I want to do, which is a really nice feature that's in here, which is why I'm using it, is I'm going to go to the dev tools that are right here, but I'm going to switch over to this info panel. And when I'm on the info panel, I can do an analysis for accessibility things that are right here. But there's also, so I can just click that and it's going to do a scan of the page to find some accessibility issues that are in here. And so we can see here the, images not having alt text. We have another problem with alt text coming up, some zooming things, and just a general scan that we can do, which is really fun. But if I jump on over to the outline option that's right here, I can actually see all of the outline of the page and how it's being created. And when I'm looking at this, I can actually see for some reason there's a skip to main content and a skip to navigation. And as far as I can tell, neither one of them does anything. Those buttons are just there. I don't know why you'd have, I think the idea with skip to navigation is it skips the scores and actually goes to the nav, and the skip to main content would skip over to here. We'll talk more about these in a minute though. But then you have all these other things where there's divs that are getting focus orders, which we saw as I was going through before. That was a problem because when I would tab to the div, I couldn't do anything when I was there. So I don't know why they put the tab index 0 on those. It's completely useless, but whatever, it's there and I can't do anything about it. And actually, yeah, you can even see here the div here and then the link here. So I'm tabbing to it. I can't do anything there. Then I have to tab onto the link when I can actually then hit my enter button and go to what it was doing. But what I really like here is they have this overlay option. So if I do show overlay, it shows me the tab order. And you can actually see it takes 102 tabs currently to get to my logo all the way across to get to here, which is just absolutely wild to me. But then there's also these red ones that are popping up because once we get to here, it jumps all the way over to this side and then I have to tab backwards through the links, which is kind of weird and kind of awkward right there. And then the rest of the flow here isn't terrible. So after that, but it gives you an idea, and I love being able to visualize the tab order like this. So it's a really cool thing to quickly spot some tabbing order issues that might be on a given website, which I really like. So yeah, if you do want to check out Polypaint, once again, the link for it is in the description. There's lots more stuff that I'm not talking about here, but I just wanted to highlight this one feature of it because I thought it was a pretty good one that was on topic for what we're talking about. But I'm going to close that down now. We're actually going to jump back to Spirit for a second too, because I want to talk about the tab order here as well. Let's actually zoom in on this a little bit. If I can, we'll close my sidebar there. So you can see, let's go all the way backwards here. So I'm on book, then I go to trips, check in, flight status. Oh, I can't get to travel info. I can just go to the logo now. That's kind of weird. I wonder why that's happening. And then I found out if I hover on top of it, now I can tab inside. That's not how that should work, right? Because then if someone's keyboard navigating, they're probably not going around with their mouse to open up menus to be able to get inside of them. So make sure things aren't only accessible by hover. I don't even know how that would work. If I click on it and move my mouse off, so I don't even know how this would work on mobile either, if people cannot get travel info, because I don't know how that, they had a different menu though, so maybe it was okay. But what's also interesting, even once I get past that, Spirit's okay. I go to loyalty. Actually, interesting, loyalties I can focus and has these here. So I don't know, anyway, whatever. I can get to deals, I can get to contact us, but what if I want to sign in? I can't, oh, actually, I forgot about that. There's two contact uses here. And the one on the outside does nothing. I can't interact with that in any way. And if I hit tab again, it goes to the contact us inside. Don't do that. I don't understand. This is probably similar to the ESPN one where we had the divs that were focusable that I couldn't interact with. But then interestingly, if I hit tab again, it jumps to flight. The sign in, for whatever reason, is a link I can click on as far as I can tell. Oh, it's opening a menu. So they made it so it's only working through, I guess it's a div probably that they use JavaScript do instead of being a button to add functionality. If you have functionality for something, use the correct semantic elements, use a button that I can click on that would then trigger this opening instead of using a div, because it's a div, if I click or I tab, it just skips over to the flights. I also can't change the language or anything else. Really, really frustrating. So always make sure your tab orders and everything make sense, but also that you can interact with everything via keyboard, because not everyone is using a mouse just because they're sitting at a desktop computer. And this is not just like a small subset of the population either. There's lots of users who prefer to keyboard navigate even though they can be using a mouse. So just be really careful with these things and don't assume everyone's doing it the same way as you. And you make your life easier too, because if I had that as a button instead of a div, everything would just work and I don't have to do anything extra. Anyway, or maybe you could even use a dialog and pop up now and you can do this exact same thing without having to have any JavaScript, right? So I'm trying to think, but you probably could do that. So like, yeah, use the correct semantic elements and you're better off. The other thing I did want to mention here before we moved on was that skip to main link that doesn't work on the ESPN website. So I'm going to jump back to Eric's site here. I don't actually know if he has one, but I'm assuming he does. where I'm going to come here and let's just tab. So this is selected. I'm going to shift tab. This is how you go backwards. We have home, and I'm going to shift tab again. Oh, that goes to there, which makes sense. And there we go, a skip to main content. And these should be on every website, and it should be the first focusable element on websites if I understand them correctly, and it just lets me skip to the main content. You're on YouTube now watching this. YouTube has one. You can skip past all of it to the main content. And most websites actually do have these. You'd be surprised at how often they're there. And the problem with the ESPN one that is there and does exist is the problem they made with it, as far as I could tell, was just that they don't make it visible when you've selected it. So if somebody tabs onto it, but it doesn't visually show up on the screen, how do you know that you've tabbed onto it? So you just make sure that once it's focused, that it becomes visible on the screen. That's all you have to do. It's not too complicated. And if you'd like to know more about how to make one, I have done a video on it, so I'll link that in the description below, and I'll mention it at the end of the video as well. Because yeah, they're simple to create, and it just makes the user experience a lot better. All right, let's jump back on over to the ESPN website here. We could probably do this on the Spirit one as well, because as I mentioned, they have a lot of problems. But I'm going to go over to my Axe DevTools once again, and we'll do another full page scan on here to bring up another problem that they have, which is an issue with the link text. So right here, you can see it says links must have discernible text. I'm going to click on that, and it's going to show us the example of where the problem is, which is in this case a link, and you get this a lot. So this is the watch icon. I think it might be this icon up here, where we have an icon that's a link. So if somebody were to click on this, it would actually go to this page. The icon works, but because it's focused on using I don't know what the watch icon is, but they're adding in the icon through CSS by the looks of it. But even if you just had an SVG in there or something else, it causes the same problem, where we have a link that if somebody's using something as a screen reader, they have no idea what that link is actually doing. They get to the link, it tells them there's a link, and there's no information here. And what's nice here with the Axe DevTools is they give you different ways that you can do it. So Element does not have, that's a problem. So they're even saying different things you can do. So if there was an area label saying what that link was, that could solve the problem. Because if there's just the image in there or just nothing, and it's creating the icon with CSS, or adding the icon with CSS, then the area label can give that extra context. And the other alternative there is just to use an area label or area labeled by. Probably the area label is what you'll use most of the time, just to provide the context of where that link is going if you just have an icon that's in there, to provide that extra context if there's just an icon in there and nothing else to give any extra context of where that link is going. And of course, this would be the same for buttons. If there's an interactive element a user can interact with and it's just an icon in there, you need some way just to provide that extra context of what's going to happen when they click on that. And the last thing I want to talk about is just that there are a lot, it gets a lot deeper, right? As soon as you start getting into more complicated things, like you want to build a carousel, or you want to build a tabs, or a good date picker that isn't styled like the default one, things can get really complicated really quickly. And all of a sudden you're having to look things up a lot more. And that can definitely make things take a lot longer to do it properly. It's still worth doing. But I understand sometimes when you have a deadline, it has to ship. It's not saying that that gives you an excuse to skip over it, but just I understand that sometimes those types of things can happen. You can still try your best to take the best practices there, really try as much as we can. But for a lot of these things that I was looking at in this video, it's more about being sloppy and just doing things incorrectly from the start, and sometimes making your life harder. To make a menu that's appearing, we can do that really easily by using the correct elements. Just use a dialogue element, and it's so easy to do now. We have the show modal, and we have the other ways of creating dialogues that appear, or just using a button when you should use a button rather than using a div, so the element is actually focusable, and not putting tab indexes, which is extra work, onto divs that are already there, or removing focus rings from things so you can actually, a user can know where they are on a page when they're navigating through in ways that are different from how you might be navigating through a page. So just by being aware of these really simple things and slowly leveling up what you know about accessibility, that will then slowly start leaking into those more complicated things that you might be creating and might be having to focus on, to the point where it might not be as much more work as you thought, and you're not building in all of this technical debt into the the projects that you're creating. So once again, links to everything are down in the description below if you want to check any of them out. And if you do want to look at that video on the skip to main link, it is right here for your viewing pleasure. And with that, I would like to thank my enablers of awesome, Andrew, Simon, and Tim, as well as all my other patrons and channel members for their monthly support. And of course, until next time, don't forget to make your corner of the internet just a little bit more awesome.